In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, we give him praise and thanks for his mercy and his goodness to the human family. If all the trees upon the earth were pens to write with, and if all the oceans were ink, and in another 7 oceans to add to its supply, the writing would still not be enough to explain the glory of God, for he's the exalted, all-powerful, all-wise. We confide in no other in our time of need, and we praise no other in our good fortune. He is one. So this is Brother Shareef with the Hour of Power. Go to Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid on YouTube. Subscribe and share to the channel so we can continue to lift the mind, body, and soul of our people. Before I get into the message, just letting people know about this wonderful poster board that my good brother Collins made for me. It's about the Hour of Power. As you can see, has the African symbol on there, and it has basically the mission statement of the Hour of Power, which is saying it was created by me and it's designed for social awareness and social change. It's not a religious channel. It's designed for social awareness and change, and to bring up solutions to our issues in our community related to Black and Latino, Black and brown people. Not a religious channel. Has spirituality to it, but it's not a religious channel. We have many different issues and topics on there that pretty much anyone that can relate to. So to get connected, all you do is go to Hour of Power on YouTube. As it states right here, type in my name, Shareef, Hamid, Hameed, and you'll be connected to the channel. So again, Hour of Power on YouTube, Shareef Hamid, Shareef, Hameed, and you'll be connected with the channel. Hit the red subscribe button. So my good brother Collins made this poster board for me explaining the mission of the Hour of Power. I'll show it one more time before we wrap up. So again, this is Hour of Power with Brother Shareef. Today's topic is entitled Drug Abuse versus Drug Addiction, the deliberate drugging of inner city America. I'm gonna say it again. Drug abuse versus drug addiction, the deliberate drugging of inner city America. With those two terms, drug abuse and drug addiction, they're used interchangeably, but people think they're the same thing, and they're not. They're not the same thing, even though they're used interchangeably, meaning drug abuse and drug addiction. I'll explain that shortly. Also, before I get into the message, and I won't be long, you know, I don't rock too long. I just try to hit you with a power-packed message within 25-30 minutes, if not less time than that. I want to dedicate this message to my brother Samuel Taborn out of Providence, Rhode Island. Unfortunately, he lost his life the other day. He's my oldest brother, and this is the second sibling I have lost. So it's a very difficult time for me. So those of y'all who believe in the power of prayer, please pray for me. So again, this goes out to my brother Samuel Taborn, who lost his life the other day in Providence, Rhode Island. There's probably not a Black family out there who don't have a family member or a friend that's either addicted to drugs, has been incarcerated due to drugs, or has lost their life because of drugs. I'm gonna say that again. There's probably not a single Black family out there. If I was to line up 100 Black families or Latino families in America, there's probably not a single family that don't have a family member or a friend that has died from drugs, addicted to drugs, or has been incarcerated by drugs. This is a scourge on our community that has greatly affected us, and we have to do what we can to help our people that's in this condition. It's an awful thing. It's an awful thing, and it don't just affect the person who is addicted to drugs. It affects anyone who they interact with, which would be their family and friends. We have to wrap our arms around them. We have to be loving and nurturing and understanding to their illness, because it's not a criminal act. Even though under the influence of drugs and alcohol, you may do some criminal things, but being addicted to drugs isn't a criminal act. It's an illness. It's a disease. I've never taken drugs before. I haven't had alcohol in over 25 years, And I've never smoked no weed, never smoked no cigarettes. Thanks to God, not my own doing. So I don't know the feeling of being addicted to drugs. I am a drug counselor. I'm a therapist. I work with people with mental health and substance abuse issues, but I don't know that feeling. It has to be a strong thing. Look at the people that we have lost. Len Bias, Miles Davis. A lot of people don't know that. Marvin Gaye. We can go on and on and on. Michael Jackson with prescription drugs, even though they killed him. That's another topic though. We have lost many, many people. So it doesn't just go after poor people or just black people or Latino people. It'll attack anyone, but it is a deliberate attempt to take us out. It is a tool used, is a deliberate attempt to take us out. We'll talk about that also. So I just want to briefly explain the difference between drug abuse and drug addiction, because again, that's my field. That's what I do. And again, people hear those words and think they're the same thing, but they're not the same, even though they're used in the same concept and they're used interchangeably. So I'm gonna just read the effects of drug abuse versus drug addiction. How you know someone is abusing, remember, abuse and addiction, how someone is abusing drugs is it affects their interaction with who? Their family and friends. So if someone is starting to become erratic, irrational, your relationship with them is changed. They may be stealing from you, getting violent. You know they are abusing drugs. That's one of the first signs, is their interaction with their family and friends, or their lack of interaction. They may start pulling away because now the drugs or the alcohol is their main focus and goal in life. That is one of the first signs you can tell someone is abusing drugs. Abusing drugs. How else can we tell someone is abusing drugs? School and work. Someone who's trying to be productive, you're either working or going to school. When you see something that was so important to them, something that they, goals that they had, whether they're going to school or working to provide for themselves or their family, and they just start leaving it off, or it's a big reduction, that's how you know someone is abusing drugs. A huge reduction or a huge change in school and work. Other signs, I'm moving along, other signs that someone is abusing drugs is they start getting into legal trouble. Of course, you don't got to be a drug counselor or a PhD to know that if someone starts abusing drugs or alcohol and they're not thinking straight and they're not making good decisions, that's going to lead into legal problems. They could get behind the wheel, which is very dangerous, start driving. That means your license is going to be suspended or revoked or stripped from you altogether. Then you're going to have to go to court. That's going to be court costs. You may have to get a lawyer. You could get into a fight or with a family member, a friend, a spouse, a significant other. All those things are legal problems. So that's another clear sign that someone is abusing drugs. Legal problems. Other signs that someone is abusing drugs, remember abusing, they need the drug to enjoy social activities. They need the drug to enjoy social activities. So if you had like a football game or something like that, and or a family function, and they could used to enjoy those activities without drugs or alcohol. Now the same activities, the same functions, they gotta have a drink. They gotta have some kind of drug paraphernalia just to enjoy themselves, even though that may fly over the average person's head. That is a clear sign that they are addicted to drugs. Not addicted, they are abusing drugs. That is a clear sign. Another one, they go out of their way to use drugs. That's pretty common sense. They go out of their way to use drugs, meaning they have a high level of anxiety. They're real anxious. They're always fidgeting around and looking to hit the streets to get their fix. That is a clear sign that they're what? Abusing drugs. And then we're going to get to the addiction part. Another sign is constantly thinking or trying to use drugs, which kind of goes with the last one I said. Constantly trying to use drugs. So I think I went through that list. That is a clear sign, clear signs that someone is abusing drugs. I'm gonna run through that list again real quick. A difference of interaction with family and friends, reduction in school and work, legal problems, needs drugs to enjoy social activities that they previously could do sober. That's a telltale sign. Going out of their way to use drugs and constantly thinking or trying to use drugs. Those are clear signs that someone are abusing drugs. Now, you may be asking, well, what about the addiction part? It's a little bit different. Again, these words are used interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same. The way you can tell someone is addicted to drugs is tolerance level. Tolerance level meaning they're using more drugs to achieve a desired level of a high, or their diminished effect of using the same amount of drugs. So their tolerance level, they're using more drugs. So let's just say someone would drink a half a case of beer and they ran a couple lines of cocaine and they were high. Now, instead of a half a case of beer, they need a whole case of beer, or they need more drugs to get the same high that they previously did with that lesser amount. Now they're topping off the half a case of beer, or I've never taken drugs before. However they measure these grams of drugs or whatever, that's not doing it anymore. They need more to get the same high, or they're having a diminished effect using the same amount. Again, which is almost the reverse of what I said before. A half a case or a gram got them high. Now they may use that same amount, but they're not getting high anymore. That's what you call tolerance level. That is a clear sign that someone is now addicted. They don't want from abuse to addiction. What else? Having withdrawal symptoms. We've probably seen this. Someone getting real fidgety. What we talked about before. Getting real anxious, breaking out in sweats. So now, if they're not using the drugs, now they're having obvious physical withdrawal symptoms. Someone sent me a message there. So again, that's what you call withdrawal. If they're not using drugs, they start having physical withdrawal symptoms. Another telltale sign that they went from abuse to addiction. What else? The substance is taken in higher amounts and no longer in a longer period of time. The substance is taken in higher amounts or a longer period of time, meaning they need to take it more and more and more just to get at a certain high. That is a clear sign that they are now addicted to it. They need it. They gotta have it. Substance is taken in higher amounts and for a longer period of time. That is another sign of being addicted to drugs. What else? Can't cut down the amount of use. They can't cut down the amount of use. So without going, without going to get some kind of help, whatever they do, they cannot cut down their amount of use on their own. They can't kick the problem on their own. That means they need it. They gotta have it. They are now addicted. So now you should start seeing the difference between abuse, which is mostly your social interaction, but now addiction is more becoming a psychological and a physical ailment. That's the main differences between the two. Another sign that someone is addicted to drugs spends a lot of time trying to get the drugs. Again, being real fidgety, doing whatever by any means necessary. That's the negative part of what Malcolm taught us. By any means necessary, they're going to get these drugs. That is a clear sign that they are now addicted to drugs. So again, the difference between addiction and abuse of drugs is abuse is your social interaction. You start seeing the social interaction change with family, friends, work, and school. Addiction is physical, and mental ailment. Social activities given up or reduced. We talked about that with abuse. Social activities given up or reduced. They used to like going to play basketball, going to get basketball games, go to play pool, whatever they like to do socially. Now it's totally given up or greatly reduced. A clear sign that they are now addicted to drugs because those social activities are no longer important to them. The drugs or the alcohol is their main goal and focus in life. Last point about being addicted to drugs is they keep using the drugs even though they have obvious physical or mental consequences. That is probably the most telltale sign that someone is addicted to drugs. They keep using the drugs even though they have obvious physical or mental consequences. You got into a car accident. You had a drug overdose and almost lost your life. And as soon as they can get to it again, they're at it again. That is a definite telltale sign that someone is now not abusing drugs, but addicted to drugs. So that is the difference between addiction and abuse. Again, abuse is social interaction. Your social interaction with family, friends, your work is reduced, your school is reduced. Going out of your way to get the drug, it's more of social interaction. That's how you can tell that. And then the difference with addiction is more physical and mental, right? Tolerance level. You need more drugs to get high. Start having withdrawal symptoms when you're not using the drugs. Need to take more just to get high. And even though you have obvious physical and mental consequences, you continuously use and take the drug. That is the difference between drug abuse and drug addiction. So I hope that part open up your eyes. Anyone you know, especially a family member that is suffering from this, because it's an illness and it's not a criminal act. Do what you can to support them, nurture them, and get them some help. And this is by design. We must understand this, family. I could be here another 2 hours just explaining that, how this is by design. If you go back, because I'm a student of history, if you go back in 1839, and you can get a book, I wish I had it in front of me, but it's in storage because I relocated to Pennsylvania. If you go back and or if you read a book called The History of China, it explains in that book how the Opium Wars was the worst social epidemic that the country of China has ever suffered. And that happened in 1839. Get the book, The History of China, and it explains how the Opium Wars was the worst social epidemic that the country of China has ever suffered. Again, the Hour of Power, this is what we do. Go to Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid on YouTube, subscribe and share so we can continue to lift the mind, body, and soul of our people. Big ups to my brother Collins for putting this together for me. The Opium Wars. Go back in 1839 in China, real briefly. This is a real important part of history because it relates to this topic. In 1839, China had a huge abundance of tea. They had a lot of tea, and if you go to England, they wanted the tea. There was a huge demand with tea, even if you go back with the Boston Tea Party and all that. So it was a huge demand for tea. So back then, they did what they call barter and trade. So England and European countries was approaching China to get this tea because there was such a demand for it. But they needed some kind of commodity to trade with China to get the tea so they could, satisfy the supply and the demand for it in their country, meaning the European countries. Remember, they wanted the tea. So what they did was officials in England approached officials in China and said, what can we trade to get this tea? Because people want it. And this could be a huge selling item. So somehow they came up with the agreement to trade tea for silver, meaning the European countries, mainly England, had silver and China had the tea. So at the docks, at the loading docks, they were trading silver for tea. So China was getting the silver, and in exchange, they was trading to England for the tea. That became a problem financially for European countries, in particularly England, because now all their silver was being depleted and they felt like it wasn't an even trade, even though they agreed to it. So they said, we can't keep trading silver for tea. Financially, this isn't working out for us. So they needed to come up with a low bulk commodity item so they can continue to get their tea. Guess what that item was that they came up with is a low bulk item to replace the silver, because all their silver started being depleted and financially it wasn't working out for them. Opium. which is an offspring of heroin. They contacted and got in contact with some unscrupulous officials at the docks in China, and they started trading, instead of silver for tea, opium for tea. Opium. So at the docks, they was bringing in the opium. Now they had doped up almost all of China in 1839, and it turned into a war because a man who is one of my heroes, because he stood up for his people and his country, Lin Chinzu, look him up. Lin Chinzu there in China said, you're not going to keep bringing in this opium and doping up my people. Listen to this and tell me if it don't sound familiar. The people in China, the women were prostituting, the children was hooked on the drugs, it was murders. Don't that sound familiar? People prostituting, people being hooked on drugs, whole generations of people hooked on this opium. This is what was going on. And Lin Chinzu said enough is enough. He went to the loading docks and he dumped at least 300 chests of opium into the ocean there, which cost England a huge amount of money. They actually went to war with China because they didn't want to be drug addicts. Went to war with this man. Put a double indemnity on him, and then Canada, the Dutch, the French, all them ganged up on China and teamed up with England to attack China because this man wouldn't allow opium to come into his country and to continue to destroy his country and his people. Remember, his name was Lin Chinzu, and he dumped 300 chests at least of opium into the ocean because he didn't want his people to be doped up on opium. Again, women and children prostituting, violence because the were strung out on opium, which is basically heroin. This was in 1839. This war went on from 1839 to 1842, and they actually had a second opium war over opium not being allowed to come into the country, and other European countries ganged up on China because they didn't want to be drug addicts. Imagine that, going to war with another country because you don't want to be a drug addict and you're trying to force someone to have drugs and opium at that time coming in. You can look it up. It is a pivotal part of history, especially as it relates to this topic. It's the Opium Wars, and it was two of them. First one, 1839 to 1842, and I think the second one, 1842 to about 1844, 1845, there in China. And if you talk to any historian there in China, and if you ask them what was the worst social epidemic in the history of China, they'll easily tell you the Opium Wars, because their people was doped up on heroin and opium because of European countries coming in, finding unscrupulous people at the docks. At first they was trading opium for silver, and then England's silver got depleted because they kept on trading for the tea. They said this ain't a good financial move. They found another low bulk item to replace the silver, which was opium, and they brought the opium in and doped up a whole country, and it was a huge social epidemic in 1839 in China, and went to war with him and charged this man a double indemnity. They fined him. That's what a double indemnity is. They fined him hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands back at that time, but it equals out to this time hundreds of millions of dollars. Fined him because he was bold enough to stand up for his people and not let opium come in and destroy his people. These people are the real drug addicts. Not the real drug addicts, the real drug dealers. They use drugs too. I didn't say it wrong. If you look up statistics here in America, way more white people are addicted and on drugs than black people, because it's more of them than us. So demographics wise, of course, they're going to be on drugs more than black people, but they make it seem like it's more black people on drugs than white people, but that's not true. So my point was, these are the real drug pushers. They're the real drug pushers, doping up a whole country behind drugs, and they're doing it now as we speak. If you get the book, I've had the pleasure to meet this brother more than once. Freeway Rick Ross, him and my good brother Echo, they're touring the country with his book, talking about how America systematically brought crack cocaine into America, back into inner city America back in the late 70s and 80s, particularly South Central Los Angeles via Freeway Rick Ross. He and Brother Echo has been touring the country with his book and explaining how they did this. And Gary Webb first put that out there with his book called Dark Alliance. Definitely get that book called The Dark Alliance by Gary Webb. He's a white man, a freelance reporter, and he explained how America systematically brought crack cocaine into America, in particularly South Central Los Angeles, spread it throughout inner city America there. They hooked up with Freeway Rick Ross. His name was Rick Ross. He just got kicked out of college because he couldn't read, but he went there on a tennis scholarship, and he was a fast talker. He was very charismatic. They hooked up with him. Make a long story short, he started spreading crack cocaine there in South Central Los Angeles. He'll tell you that, and eventually spread it all up and down the West Coast and eventually the East Coast. He was making anywhere from $450,000 to $1 million a week selling crack cocaine there in South Central Los Angeles, meaning Freeway Rick Ross. And then it spread all up and down the coast and eventually ravaged almost every black community and Latino community here in America. So Freeway Rick Ross was the first major crack cocaine drug dealer hired by the United States government via Ronald Reagan and his no good wife Nancy Reagan. Here they're poisoning America with drugs because they were making a trade with the Contras over there and with the Iran Contras over there in Iran, trading weapons so they can uproot the government over there, and they were trading guns for drugs and then bringing the drugs here and polluting inner city America with it. While they were saying say no to drugs, his wife making commercials saying say no to drugs, they're deliberately bringing drugs into inner city America. All you got to do is Google the Iran Contras with Oliver North. That happened back in the 80s, and it'll clearly tell you government documents how they were systematically bringing crack cocaine into inner city America. And they hired Freeway Rick Ross, drug lords from Colombia, Danilo Blandon and Oscar Menez approached Freeway Rick Ross there in South Central Los Angeles because it was a communication barrier, and they had to approach someone who could reach the people, which was black and Latino people there, mostly black people. And they used him to push crack cocaine in South Central Los Angeles, and they used to drop the drugs off on the freeway, and that's how on Route 10, and that's how he got his name Freeway Rick Ross, because they used to drop the crack cocaine off there in South Central Los Angeles, and that's how he got his name Freeway Ricky Ross. Salute to the brother. Now he's trying to do something positive to reverse the harmful effects that happen to our people. Again, it ain't a black family in America. Don't have a family member or a friend that is addicted to drugs, abusing drugs, incarcerated from drugs, or has lost their life from drugs. I just told you about it. Rest in peace to my sister Veronica, and rest in peace to my brother Samuel, who has lost their life, and many, many others. We have to do what we can to help our people and stop this. It's the scourge of America, and certainly the scourge of black people, because whenever America has a cold, black people has the flu. We always get it worse. We get stiffer jail sentences. Chemically, by the way they make this crack cocaine, there's something in it that makes us more addicted to it than the average person. White people can use cocaine and function. They can work. We use it. It just breaks crashes our whole world down. Just look at it. Look at the people that you know that's on this, and you tell me what's going. Their whole life crashes down. Lose their house, their car, their wife, their children, and eventually their life. There has to be something chemically there that's making us crash when we use this stuff. Yes. Rest in peace to those who have lost their life behind crack cocaine and other substances and drugs. We have to do what we can to help our people. We can no longer stand by and lose more people behind drug abuse and drug addiction. It is absolutely taking us out of here. So again, this is Brother Shareef with the Hour of Power. Go to Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid on YouTube. Subscribe and share the channel so we can continue to lift the mind, body, and soul of our people. Again, It's a difference between drug abuse and drug addiction. I explained that to you earlier. Share this video with like minds. Look up the opium wars, how European countries, and particularly England, and then eventually other ones joined in, the Dutch, the French, Canada, what they always do, ganged up on China because they didn't want to be drug addicts, because the man was brave enough, Lin Shinzu was brave enough to stop the opium from coming in the docks, in the ports there, and his whole country was doped up on opium for years because of the opium that was coming in illegally at the docks. And he said no more. He dumped the opium in the ocean, and they hit him up with a double indemnity fine and went to war with him, called the Opium Wars. It was actually two of them, starting from 1839 to about 1849. Opium War I, Opium War II. And then, of course, the much documented story with our brother Freeway Rick Ross, how the United States government via Ronald Reagan, via the Iran-Contras, via Oliver North, and many others were involved with systematically bringing crack cocaine into inner city America, doping up Black and Latino people, particularly Black people. Ain't a family out there that can't say that they don't have a family member that's addicted or abusing drugs, incarcerated behind drugs, or has lost their life behind drugs. We pray for those who has this illness, this disease. Do what you can to love them, nurture them, and wrap your arms around them to help them with this addiction and disease. It's challenging. It's not easy because, like I explained earlier, your relationship with them is severely fractured. And you take care of yourself and you make sure yourself is safe first. But it's very challenging dealing with someone that has that illness and disease. So again, this is Brother Shareef with the Hour of Power. Go to Hour of Power, Shareef Hamid on YouTube. Subscribe and share so we can continue to lift the mind, body, and soul of our people. Rest in peace to my sister Veronica, and rest in peace to my brother Samuel, who just the other day lost his life. I leave you in peace as I came. Assalamu alaikum to my Muslim family, and happy Savior's Day to my brothers and sisters in the nation of Islam. Minister Farrakhan will be giving a timely message today. So those who are interested, tune into NOI.org to listen to the minister. You don't got to agree with everything he says, but he has a lot of jewels to share. We got to get out of that. Oh, I'm not a Muslim. I don't agree with everything. You're not going to agree with everyone. Who agrees with everyone that someone else, everything that someone else says? But the jewels that he has, extract that and try to see if it's something that can help you in your life. So assalamu alaikum to my Muslim family. Praise the Lord to my Christian family. Shalom to my Hebrew Israelite family. Hotep to my Black conscious family. And what's good to you to my people in the streets. This is Brother Shareef with the Hour of Power. Drug abuse versus drug addiction. Subscribe and share. Peace.